Welcome to the Welcome to the Under 8 Podcast, a daily college basketball podcast brought to you in every weekday under 8 minutes. At the time of recording, it is Thursday, November 9th at 12:04 a.m. My name is Josh Mullenix. On today's pod, a pair of matchups in the Windy City. Syracuse gets a second win of the season on a relatively slow night in college hoops. It's all right now on the Under 8 Podcast. Josh Doering is here with me. Josh, you can rest easy tonight knowing that if you played a college basketball game on this particular evening, you probably would have had a better offensive performance than the Arizona State Sun Devils. 71-56, they fall to Mississippi State. 17 for 53 from the field, 5 of 21 from the three-point line. Thank the Lord they went to the 5 of 21 from the three-point line. Thank goodness they went to the free throw line 25 times because they might not have cracked 25 if it weren't for the charity stripe.
Yeah, you'll be surprised to know the 17 made field goals were their fewest since the 51-29, 29 loss to Washington State in December of 2021, if you remember that game. So, yeah.
I've got a poster of that one. I look at it every day. That 51-29 loss. I see it all the time.
I mean, Trey Fort comes back from 2 years of JUCO and it's halftime, 18 Arizona State, 14 Trey Fort. And it didn't get, Arizona State did better in the second half, but you can't do much worse. So, and the other thing I'll throw out there too, this was a Mississippi State team without Tolu Smith. That is a huge deal, and they just didn't miss him at all in this game.
A Mississippi State team without Tolu Smith, a Mississippi State team without Shaquille Moore, a Mississippi State team without Keyshawn Murphy, basically, 3 starter level guys. We just didn't have any of them, and it didn't particularly matter. I feel like I have the same relationship with Arizona State every single year. It's all low efficiency guys. None of them are really known for sharing the basketball. Some nights they'll make a bunch of shots and it'll look decent. And they'll sometimes even go on stretches where they sniff number 1 in the country, in miraculously, because it all kind of gels together for a couple weeks. And then at some point it seems to fall apart. They don't shoot it well. And then you have nights like this. I feel like it's just some variation of this over and over again for Bobby Hurley's program right now.
And it's going to be interesting in a year where the Pac-12 looks to be so far living up to the fairly high expectations. Because, they're going to have a couple of those games where they probably just can't be stopped. And it might actually alter the Pac-12 standings at the top if they get it on the right day. But the inconsistency is what is consistent, as we kind of like to say.
Yeah, that's about the last thing that you want to be consistent. 71-56, the Mississippi State Bulldogs get a victory. They were solid, like you said, missing some players, but didn't have a ton of trouble at Wintrust Arena on Wednesday night. The early game on Wednesday night at Wintrust, the Barstool Sports Invitational, was FAU, Florida Atlantic, against Loyola Chicago. The first time that we've seen the Owls post Final Four in this season, where they're top 10 preseason. Lots of hype around this basketball team and all of the pieces that Dusty May brought back from last year's Final Four squad, a squad that won 30, north of 30 games. So they looked like a team against Loyola Chicago that they outmatched and kind of took care of business, even though it took the Owls a little while to kind of get going early in this game, but ultimately kind of controlled it for all 40 minutes.
Yeah. Balanced scoring like we expect to see from this team. And You always think John L. Davis, Elijah Martin. Well, Elijah Martin had 5 points on 1 of 8 shooting. They still found a way to get it done. Vlad Golden was really good. You can go down the list. Most of the other starters were really good. You didn't get a lot from the bench. But the thing I sort of came away with is these are the kind, and I know Loyola is not what Loyola was a couple years ago, but these are the kind of games you're going to play in the AAC, right? Not the top end of the AAC, but if they're going to be what they're supposed to be this year, they should be winning these games consistently. And so you can't draw too many positive conclusions about, Florida Atlantic's going to be a top 10 team all season based on this or anything like that. But it is good to see them take care of business and look pretty convincing against the kind of team you're going to see in conference play pretty often.
Yeah, the thing that I'll point towards as they get some of these tougher matchups in non-conference, and then of course where this team wants to get back to ultimately is, and you mentioned it a little bit, but you're gonna need more than four field goals total from the bench. You're just gonna, when you have a balanced attack like that against the best teams, the bench is going to be part of that. So it didn't matter tonight. Loyola Chicago bouncing back from a disappointing season a year ago. They're definitely in a rebuild phase at the moment. So it shouldn't take hitting on all cylinders for FAU to control this game, like you said, but certainly some room for improvement.
Yeah, the depth is back. That's the whole point. It's not just 2 guys. It's not just 5 guys. It's that you've got 7 or 8 contributors from last year's team that played real meaningful minutes that are back. Going to need all those guys to contribute. And, right, players have bad days. Players are rusty at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
It's just a fair point of observation.
Last but not least, well, a couple different things, but Josh has been all in on the orange of Syracuse in the preseason. And so on a slow night in the college basketball world, when Syracuse plays, Josh very nicely asked if we could touch on the orange. The orange now 2-0 after a 89-77 win over Canisius. Judah Mintz, 26 points. JJ Starling, the Notre Dame transfer, former 5-star, 17, 7, and 7. That's a really nice stat line. And 10 of 22 from the 3-point line for Canisius, but they went 5 of 17 from the stripe.
Oh, even out, I guess.
That's one of those. Did I read that right? Stats, but that is absolutely how you read it. And Syracuse getting a 12-point win, and now they're 2-0 as they're in the early stages of the post-Boeheim era.
Yeah, I've been saying this. I'll say it again. The talent is there. Adrian Autry is not working with a bunch of kind of leftover pieces that he's going to try and have to put together here. This team has real, legit talent that starts with Judah Mintz and JJ Starling. You already read off their stat lines. Now, the other part of this is, it helps when the other team can't hit free throws. And we're going to need to see this defense against better opposition because it's not like everything was perfect. But they're showing you they've got some firepower at the very least, which is something that's exciting that you wouldn't necessarily say about Syracuse in recent seasons.
I'm not totally convinced that the defense is any good, but we'll see. Right now, they are early sample size, but right now they are the 186th ranked defense at KenPom. That's not good enough. Like I said, really small sample size, but giving up north of 70 points to 2, sub 260 KenPom teams that weren't great offensively last year. So definitely some room to improve, but like you said, I'd probably, if I'm taking over the reins of the Syracuse program, I'd like to be in the place where they are right now with some firepower that they didn't necessarily have the last couple of years. 81st in offensive efficiency last year, and the year before that they were good, but 81st last year. I'd be surprised if they're that low again this year. Yeah, last but not least, sorry, go ahead.
It just feels like they can score at a much higher level this season. That's
Last but not least, a bumper in the West Coast Conference, and just for the top echelon of the sport in general, Gonzaga wing Steel Venters out for the season with a knee injury. That was 15.3 points per game on 37.1% shooting. That Mark Few's team is going to miss this year. The wing depth was already a question mark for Gonzaga, and having a guy like Steele out of the rotation is going to mean some pretty big shoes for guys like Dusty Schramer and some other freshmen and young college basketball players to step up and produce in that spot.
The excitement about this team and the way it was built was around these transfers. And not just one of them, not just two of them, but three of them. And Steel Venters was one of those three transfers. So obviously devastating for him, but also it does leave a serious hole here and some question marks about how does this get filled? What does this mean for Gonzaga's ceiling as a team that I think you would agree people seem to be higher than I thought on with the additions, mainly these transfers. And so now, unfortunately, you've already lost one of them. We're going to have to see what that means. And if, like you said, anybody can fill that gap and kind of pick up the slack in a situation that you're not used to really seeing those players at Gonzaga, right? It's more of a either transfer heavy or developmental program. It's going to look a little bit different here, trying to fill the spot that was supposed to be Steel Venters.
You know, the starting five of this team has a similar vibe. I mean, of course, it doesn't have Drew Timme in it, but it still has lots of proven college basketball talent: Ryan Nembhard, Anton Watson. It's the bench doesn't have the same kind of, oh my gosh, there's an Andrew Nembhard coming off the bench, there's an Anton Watson coming off the bench kind of thing. Right. At this point, it's only been Greg coming off the bench that has any sort of college basketball production in the past. And so that was already something I was looking at. And to see it get it even slimmer is frankly a bummer to not see Venters in a Gonzaga uniform this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of impact this has. This could be a really big deal in terms of, like I already said, Gonzaga ceiling, and also just simply the WCC title race. Because the margin might be that thin. St. Mary's is that good.
St. Mary's, once I saw the news, St. Mary's was plus 130 to win the West Coast Conference. I wouldn't be surprised if that moves into with Gonzaga being the slight like minus 125 favorite. I wouldn't be surprised if that got even closer to a pick 'em between those two teams.
Yep.
That's all we've got for you for the Under 8 podcast for Wednesday, November 8th, recorded very early in the morning on Thursday, November 9th. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows and follow the Under 8 pod on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you tomorrow.